Thrive Guys, episode 17, Creative Workflow Deep Dive. I have been scheming this week. This week has been the week of schemes. They're schemes that I'm very excited about.
Are you a Looney Tunes character?
I might as well be. So I am making plans to upgrade my my podcast editing rig. And it's actually quite a nice segue into what we're going to be talking about today. So we are recording this on the 1st of May. The new iPad Pros have been released for pre-order yesterday, and they are due to ship towards the back end of May. And I edit all my podcasts on my iPad Pro. I've got a 2018 iPad Pro, and I have a 64 gigabyte storage piece, and that is too small for some of the stuff that I want to do. So it's fine for audio, but I want to try and expand out into doing some video stuff. And it's just, when we did the previous video stuff that we did with GTA and Destiny 2, trying to edit on that and manage the files and stuff was just a nightmare. It just wasn't, big enough. So I'm looking at making an investment and getting a 1 terabyte version with the 16 gigs of RAM and all of the bits and pieces. So yeah,
nice.
So I've been scheming, mate.
I mean, it'll also just be good to start fresh and have it as a single purpose thing. Obviously, you use it for some of your apps and stuff like that, but just to have it kind of as an editing rig would be nice. In terms of install just the stuff you need.
I probably won't do that because it'd be a very expensive editing rig.
Of course you won't.
Single purpose tool. But yeah, I mean, I love the iPad. The iPad is like, and I've talked about this before, right? The iPad is such a joyful experience, and I love it. And if I could do all of my work on it, I would. I really like the new MacBook Air that I bought just before Christmas. It's kind of the best of both worlds. It's just as quick as an iPad or any other kind of iOS device, but it runs Mac OS, which is a lot more flexible, and it's just generally better than what we get on the iPad OS. But I'm excited. I think that with everything that's happening over there with the advancements that they're making on the iPad, I would be very surprised if they didn't announce some sort of big overhaul to iPad OS at WWDC this summer. I can't understand why they would put the M1 chip, which is so powerful, with 16 gigs of RAM, when iPad OS doesn't use it. It doesn't work like that. So I'm very excited. I'm scheming away, and I'm going to trade in my 2018 iPad Pro and also an old 2015 MacBook Pro that I've already upgraded anyway. So
that'll get you probably £59 off if you're lucky.
Well, I've actually looked into it, and it's going to get me about 600 quid off, which isn't too shabs. Not too shabs, Dan, to be fair.
Agreed.
So I think
pleasantly
it's at least
surprised.
worth doing. That 2015 MacBook Pro is literally sitting in this filing thing that I'm pointing at that the listeners can't see. It's basically something that you put documents in, and it's just sitting in there. I've not touched it since I've bought the MacBook Air. So yeah, so that's how I'm feeling. That's kind of where what I'm ruminating on this morning. But what about you?
Some positive rumination. Well, if you look closely at my video, I'm rocking a thermos.
I did see that.
And it's been a really good investment. I was in the Morrisons across the road from me, and
nice.
I saw a thermos, and I thought, do you know what? I'm always constantly walking around, like when I'm thinking, when I'm doing stuff. It'd be nice to just have a coffee to take on the go, which, is a dissipating heat and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's a really good investment. I pop it on in the morning. It lasts me the whole of the podcast now. So
happy days.
Normally I'm through my coffee halfway through. So that's it.
I mean, it's been a quiet week for you then, it sounds like.
Indeed.
Do you know what? I enjoy a good thermos, right? And I have, I think, 2 or 3. I think I got one as part of a deal that Nespresso were doing when you buy a load of capsules and they give you a free thermos or something like that. And I do use it every now and again. I used it a lot more in the before times when I was traveling a lot more naturally. But my coffee doesn't last long enough to get cold. I drink it so damn quick, it's gone before it even kind of gets room temperature. I I just love the taste of it. I just want it all in my goblet, so I just drink it
I'm
really
a
quick.
grazer, so I sip at it.
Okay.
Between every sentence, you'll just hear a
Fair enough. I like it.
El Cafe.
There's another thing I just wanted to raise this week because it's kind of some follow up from last week. So I'll do that and then we can jump into win of the week.
Yeah, for sure.
Topic that I wanted to just table. So one of the things that we're looking at doing in a future episode is intermittent fasting. We talked about that last week. We talked about the benefits. We talked about tracking our food and understanding. Okay, is this going to make us feel more focused? Is that kind of is the intermittent fasting piece going to make us feel more productive, or is it going to help us lose weight? Not that that's a thing that I want to do necessarily, because I downloaded a new app called Food Noms, and I've started to track my food to kind of get a base layer of when I eat, what are my macros and micros and all of that sort of stuff, so I can kind of compare A and B, before intermittent fasting and after intermittent, during and after, I guess. And well, I don't eat enough. I didn't realise it, but there's a reason why I've lost a couple of stone in lockdown. I don't eat enough. I eat on average 1,900 calories a day, and I should be eating 2,500 really, or 22 to 2,500 with my with the amount of activity that I do and my size and all of that sort of stuff. So that was a bit of an eye opener actually, and so
pick up some fruit. Start snacking.
I do enjoy a banana. Bananas do give me some element of joy, which is.
I have to share half my bananas with my dog. So
oh yeah, well,
he loves it.
Don't have that problem.
He just won't leave me alone until he gets some of them.
I have to share half my bananas with Kaylee. She loves a banana, so we have to buy double the amount now, basically. But yeah, so it's something that I need to change. And so yeah, I just thought I'd share it. It's interesting.
How do you propose that you're going to change it?
Eat more.
And don't say you're just going to eat more.
Well, okay, I literally just said that, but
cancelled.
I don't know actually, because I get hungry, right? I get ravenous at the end of the day.
What about a protein shake? That's what I'm showing you on video.
If I don't need it. I don't need to eat more protein. I don't think. I don't. Maybe I should eat breakfast, because I don't eat breakfast. I basically do intermittent fasting already just by proxy. As I said last week, I don't eat breakfast, and I don't eat a big lunch. My lunch is 400 or 500 calories. That Huel hot and savoury stuff. It's delicious, and it's just enough. That doesn't make me feel sleepy and stuff. So maybe I just need to eat more healthy snacks throughout the day, potentially.
Yeah, seeds, nuts.
Yeah, seeds, nuts, legumes.
I'm saying it like I'm the pinnacle of health. I'm saying it like I didn't eat a big bag of digestives with my lunch yesterday. I
mean, fair play to you, mate. The digestives are delightful.
I'm getting my calorie intake, but just in snacks, sweet snacks.
Yeah. I just wanted to share that because I thought it was an interesting piece of follow-up from last week where, I'd started measuring and I didn't realise, unconsciously that I wasn't eating enough to fuel the engine. And so, need to do something about that. Should we do win of the week?
Yes, please.
Fantastic. So, for those of you who don't know, Win of the Week is a segment at the top of each show where we get to share something that's happened this week that we'd like to celebrate, just to make sure that we start our conversations on a positive note. We post a reminder on our platforms every Friday, so if you'd like to share your Win of the Week with us, tag us on your post on Twitter or Instagram at ThriveGuysPods or with the hashtag Win of the Week. So, Dan, why don't you start us off this week? What was your Win of the Week?
I've got two, because as always, we don't do these things in single forms anymore. So
no, we should just change it to Wins of the Week, because you always have more than one.
It's just getting problematic, yeah. I can't help winning, Joe.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, you go for it.
So I completed 1 week of our cold shower experiment that we discussed in last week's episode. And my win is that I actually found value in it, considering it's the one that I was dreading the most and the one that when I started I was miserable about. But taking, a couple of steps back and, thinking about what it's doing for my body and how I feel after coming out of the shower and having, getting bombarded with cold water is a win for me. I actually wrote down how I felt, and I actually felt that I was more alert. I was less stressed. So that's been one of the wins. And the second win is that I feel largely like I've been a good friend this week. I've reached out to people just to check in and make sure they're okay, which isn't something I normally do. I do check in occasionally, but it's something that I've tried to focus on more this year,
right?
Especially having not been able to see people. And it turns out that one of my friends was kind of going through a bit of a rough patch. So I feel like my win is, actively being able to listen to them and offer some guidance and just actually have a decent catch up.
That's good.
It just was like good timing. Yeah.
Yeah. Good
what
timing.
About yourself?
Good timing. I like that. Well, not that I copied your win of the week, but obviously we've been going through the same struggle together with this cold shower challenge that we set ourselves.
Careful how you word
week.
this, Joe. We podcast together, but we don't shower together.
Oh no, yeah, okay.
We don't share that experience entirely.
Let me completely clarify my statement. We have been in separate showers going through the cold shower challenge this week, and so today was day 6, and honestly, my win is sticking with it because, actually, like you, and I don't want to kind of give any foreshadowing for next week because we will deep dive into what value we got from bombarding ourselves with icy cold water every day for 2 weeks. But it's been interesting, and it's the sort of thing that before it happens every morning, I'm like, oh God, do I have to do this? Oh, why don't I just not do it? No one will know. No one will know that I won't. That I had a nice hot shower and enjoyed it, but I haven't. And that actually is willpower incarnate, right? And I'm pretty chuffed with myself for that, to be honest with you, because I am the sort of sneaky sneak that will not do it and say that I did. If I'm really honest with myself,
yeah.
I don't mind deceiving you, Dan. I care not about deceiving you. But I'm not. It's been you can ask Kaylee because she can hear my grunts of pain from the bathroom.
Yeah.
Like, oh Jesus Christ, like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, there we go. So that's
I'm
my
glad
win of the
you're
week.
sticking with it.
I'm getting value from it. Look, I don't want to jump into it today because I think that, then we'll have nothing to talk about next week. And, oh, God, what a scheduling problem that would be. So
Sure.
I am quite keen to move swiftly on and jump into our meat and potatoes topic for this week, which is all about our creative workflow. So we're going to deep dive on this today, and I'm really excited to do it. So just to provide some context for yourselves, dear listeners, for this episode, we're going to take a very short departure away from our day jobs and have a conversation about the workflows we deploy in our creative endeavours. So we spend a lot of time on Thrive Guys talking about work, but this week is personal. So Dan, you've spoken many times on the show about the music work that you do, and I manage all of the audio processing for Thrive Guys. So I thought it would be a nice little holiday to run our listeners through how we get this kind of work done. So I'll caveat this to start with because this could get very techy and geeky very quickly. And for people who aren't really into audio, that might be quite alienating. So let me provide you with some reassurance, dear listener. If you are not an audio person, then we will not talk to you as if you are today. So we're going to go real high level, and I want to keep this episode accessible for everybody. So if there is any techie stuff that we do end up talking about, I will step in and explain it to you like you're 5. And hopefully that'll be a way that everyone will understand. So Dan, why don't you start us off with running through your music making workflow, and then I'll talk to the listener about how we run the podcast.
Awesome. Yeah. So I have a couple of varying processes based on whether I'm working alone or whether I'm working with a client or what kind of project it is. So for myself, I'm going to start with that because it's something I'm very familiar with.
Yeah, no.
Someone I know very well. So I tend to go through a similar process each time, which I just call vibing. Literally, I don't usually sit down with the idea of like, I'm going to make a song within this genre or I want it to sound like this.
Right.
I mean, sometimes I'll hear something and be like, I really like that drum sound. I want to do something with that. Or I'll hear a guitar riff and I'm like, I really like the tone of that guitar. I could do something with that. So I try to tend to treat, for my personal stuff, writing songs and writing music as like a very reactive process. Like the most recent example is when we were talking last week. I think we spoke about headspace.
Yeah.
And there was a phrase called concentrated calm. And I just loved it. And I was like, so I noted that down. And I was like, you know what? I want to write something around concentrated calm, because you can put some like energy behind that.
Yeah.
You're concentrating on focusing and making music, but it's like a calming experience. So, you know, you get like meditation music. I was like, you know what? Just as a phrase, I would love to do something creative with that, with concentrated calm. So I started working on that. It's just like a nice load of synths and, you know, some light drums.
I've kind of got in my mind like the Massive Attack drum beat, like a little bit of vinyl crackle,
yeah,
and then which is like the crackle from an old vinyl player,
lo-fi,
and then just some like a like that's what I've got in my head when I think of concentrated calm.
So you've basically taken my whole concept, because that's exactly how I write music.
There we go. I love that.
It's easy. So there's, you know, there is a lot more to it which I'll dig into, but that's basically it. You take an idea and you run with it.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to, you know, I've spoken before about how I release stuff under pseudonyms and stuff, so I have no pressure around like advertising or making sure people are listening to it. For me, it's like a cathartic process, and I enjoy doing it.
You do it for the sake of doing it.
I like building up the layers. Yeah, I'll do it because it's my hobby, and it's like, you know, in many years of doing music, I feel like I get my best results when I'm not forcing myself to, you know, sit down and play and hit deadlines and stuff like that.
Hell yeah.
And if people, you know, I tend to see that people get more value out of the stuff that I don't advertise and aren't associated to a person. They're just kind of music. You know, we're in the age of people just putting on music for the sake of, you know, working and stuff like that. So in terms of from like an arrangement perspective, in terms of how a song comes together, I usually find, like as I mentioned, like a drum loop or a guitar, something that I like the sound of, and I'll just build around that.
Right.
Because when it comes to like, you know, background music, there's not a lot of, I guess, dynamic change or arrangement change. It's kind of just, you know, build up a bit of tension, disperse it, and kind of, you know, it's a lot of ups and downs. So I'll find like a drum loop or what I call a bass foundation. I'll select either a keyboard or synth, or I'll pick up my guitar and just kind of go to town. I then, as you just showed, you know, you sing some melodies, and you either play them or just record the vocal, whatever you want to do. How you're just kind of vocalizing what you had in your head, that's exactly what I do. Yeah, I just try to keep it as relaxed as possible, because that's what I enjoy. I don't sit there stressing about what a synth should sound like. I then leave it a couple of days and come back. So I'll mix as I go along, which is the, you know, the process of sorting out volumes and shaping the audio and stuff like that. But then I leave my ears to relax for a couple of days and come back to it and see what I still like versus what I don't like.
For those who, you know, maybe aren't familiar with the process of writing music, why do you take a step back and let your ears relax for a couple of days?
Just to come back with a fresh perspective.
Yeah.
Like I tend to find, like, you know, I talk about vibing. You're in a particular vibe, and you kind of follow one route, and when you come back to it, you have like a fresh sense of what you want it to sound like, and you're not really in that same mindset.
Yeah.
So you kind of come to it and you listen to it as like a new experience.
A different person almost.
Yeah, exactly. It's like having, there's types of listening called active listening and passive listening. And most musicians will be like active listeners. So if they're listening to a song on the radio and stuff, they'll try and pick out all the different components of what they like. And then there's passive listeners, who are people that don't have any musical knowledge, don't have any affiliation. They can't even describe what a hi-hat is or whatever, or they don't know what a kick drum is. So they just kind of listen to it and they go, yeah, I like it. And it's like, well, what do you like? And it's like, well, I like that. You know, it's bassy.
Yeah.
You're like, cool. And it's really cool because you can almost separate yourself away from that, because when you first listen to your record, you kind of come back as a passive listener in some senses, where you just want to enjoy it and say, well, what did I like about it? It's
a very strange phenomenon for those who are musicians like us. There's a paradigm shift at some point where, in particular, if you're a musician that also has done production in the past, where you stop listening to music as a whole thing. You know, like that is a song in all of its component parts are there together, and it's this whole element, right?
Harmonious, it's a beautiful record.
It's a singular. Well, I envy passive listeners quite a lot, because actually they listen to something in a singular format. They're like, that is a song. Whereas whenever I listen to something, and I remember listening to music from before I really got into production, and then listening to it again, and then not being able to just enjoy it as a whole thing. I'm listening to like the compression on the kick drum, or oh, that's an interesting snare. Has that been replaced with something? I wonder how they've done that. Or oh, that's an interesting like delay on that vocal. Oh, is that a tape delay or is that a digital delay? And it's like,
for sure,
you're in the weeds of the creative art, right, that you're listening to, and it's very difficult sometimes to actually like zoom out and put your head in the place of someone who's just like, oh, I like it because it's heavy, or I like it because it's bassy, you know, I like it because I can dance to it. Something that I've never been able to get back to. So yeah, it's interesting.
No, and this is why I think we posted a quote about this in terms of chasing perfection, and I think this is why it's important to just put music out there as opposed to, you know, going back to it for 500 revisions. I read somewhere, maybe about a couple of years ago, about I think it was Billie Jean by Michael Jackson. Again, I'll have to fact check myself, but it's the same kind of principle applies. And there was talks that they'd gone through Billie Jean about literally like 60 times, doing different revisions, changing certain bits and re-recording vocals. And after all that, it turns out that they'd gone back to like revision 2 or something like that and released it. So it's like you go through all these changes and you want to make different decisions on certain bits, but as long as it's not like out of tune and, you know, painful to the ear, is a listener going to pick up on it? Like the biggest mindset shift that I've had since doing production is stop making tracks for producers kind of thing.
Yeah.
Make tracks for the people that might listen to it. And it's like, you know, I know I mention him quite often, but friend of the show, David Bogner, when it comes to music, he is illiterate. He can't find the words to describe anything. But in some ways, that's what makes him the most valuable when you send him a song, because you say, oh, mate, have a listen to this. And he'll come back and just, you know, no filter. Oh, that sounds crap. You know, what bit? And he's like, that high sound. And you're like, what high sound? And he'll point it out and be like, I just don't get it.
Yeah. He's quite a special character in that he has no musical literacy.
No rhythm.
But also he is unbelievably painfully honest and has no kind of... He will be like, I don't like it. And not even like be worried about hurting your feelings in any way. You know, it's like, I don't like it. It's bad. I don't like that. Yeah. It's terrible. So yeah, he's a good sounding board, to be fair.
So I then go through like I just wanted to talk briefly about my arrangement process, because I try not to do it in terms of like a traditional sense, I guess. So my arrangement sense is kind of, I do vibe. As I said, I'll just kind of pick something up. Then I'll do drums, chords, add the bass, because I feel like the bass is the best part of the records in most of the stuff. I love it. And then I add layers, stuff that I just want to, you know, thicken up areas. Then additions, which is stuff that just like, you know, little lead bits. And then something that's called ear candy, which is like, as we discussed, like the risers and the cymbals, like additional cymbals and splashes and claps and stuff like that.
Let's define risers.
Can you give me a vocal demonstration of a riser, please, Joe? That's probably our best.
Yeah, that basically. Yeah. Where it's a build up, and it's usually, to give listeners a little peek behind the curtain, what usually happens is that the producer will take, you know, a transient sound. And what I mean by transient sound is like something like a kick drum, or like typically not a kick drum. It'll be like a snare drum.
Cymbal.
Snare or a cymbal, absolutely. So there'll be lots of, you know, high ends and lots of information in terms of the sound, but it has a really sharp attack, which is like a really like hard like hit at the start, and then a release, or a decay, which is like a it kind of, it's not just a bat, it's like a bat with a tail to it. And then you apply an effect like loads of really wet reverb to it, and so it kind of enhances that tail, so it has like you know, it embellishes the sound that's already there. It makes it sound like it's in a cavern. And you know, if you ever shout in a cavern, there's like an echo, and that's kind of what we're trying to recreate here. And then you reverse it. So you destructively, which means you actually change the audio to do all this reverby stuff. So it sounds like this big, long kind of like bah kind of sound. And then you reverse it, because what that does essentially is you still have that hard hit at the start,
cut-off, yeah.
But it turns into like a cut-off. And you get all of that kind of, that long tail then turns into this big build-up of kind of, you know, energy to that then like cut-off sound. And it's the best way, especially, you know, in the music that I used to create, which is like heavy music. It was so good at like leading into like a big kind of heavy bit or a chorus or differentiating sections and stuff. It's probably my favorite little technique. I love it, and it just always sounds great. So yeah, anyway, just wanted to explore that to give the listener a bit of background, a little bit of colour, a little bit of context.
There was actually passion in your eyes there, Joe. I saw it.
I feel passionate about this sort of stuff, you know.
Yeah, me too. And do you know what? It's more about like, and I find it hard to explain sometimes. I think we were talking about this the other day, in terms of like sometimes I add weird synths that add more texture as opposed to like any sort of audible.
Melody,
like audible additions. Yeah, it's not something that you want to listen for, but it adds like an extra texture that.
Yeah.
And when you take it out of a record, you're trying to explain it to someone. You're like, listen to this synth, and they're like, I can't hear it. You're like, well, you take it out, and then they actually go, hang on a minute. Oh right, like why does that sound so like thin, or why does that sound so dead? And it's like, well, because the layers work in tandem with each other.
Yeah.
And it's weird to explain that as a concept when you're doing audio work that you're trying to build like emotion into a record or texture into a record, as opposed to being like, oh, let's just turn that piano up, or let's make that piano thicker, for example. It's like, well, maybe let's not make the piano thicker, but let's layer it with like a Rhodes or something like that, but really quiet. And you put it so low in the mix that it just gives it like another depth to it.
If you're wanting to add like depth to something, you have to balance out the kind of the spectrum. And what I mean by that is, let's say for example, you wanted to. What I used to do quite a lot is I used to cut low end out of guitars, especially lead guitars. Like my leads didn't have a lot of low end at all. And actually, if you listen to them on their own, they sounded quite tinny. But it was to give the space to the rest of the instrumentation, so that when you then compress it, because you're compressing it for publication, which basically means you're making all of the quiet sounds loud and everything kind of the same volume, which then means you can raise the overall volume. And by making space in the mix, you're not going to get that muddy kind of sound. So, when you're, and I think you were going to talk about EQ, so I apologize if I just kind of completely gone over it. But when you're talking about adding these extra layers, you need to make space for them in the mix, because otherwise it's just going to all sound a bit cluttered and muddy. And to the listener, they won't know why. They'll just go, it doesn't sound very good. And that's what you want to try to get away from. If
there's any audio engineers that are listening, the biggest like shift I'd ever seen was if somebody like comes to you with a demo mix and it's got two guitars, and let's say you've got guitar left, guitar right, you can hear it in the headphones, whatever, it's a stereo mix and you've got guitars either side. If you just cut out literally 100 hertz from the bottom, it's almost instantly cleans up some of those guitars.
Absolutely.
And like anyone that's like mixing guitars, just try it and you'll kind of go, hang on a minute, like, because you can't, it's not an audible sound. It's not like you hear a rumble at 100 hertz or whatever it is. But as soon as you cut it out, you're just like, well, why is there so much more space?
Yeah.
Like, why can I now hear the kick drum? I've done nothing to the kick drum, and now it's suddenly there and it's present and it's nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the bass gets more space, and you got to give the bass space. So yeah, no, I totally agree with all of that. I even cut low end out of the bass, to be honest, because you don't, anything below kind of 50, 60, 70 hertz. It doesn't really add any. I mean, this is the kind of music that I used to make, right? I never made dance music or anything like that. I think I did once for university, and I got an A. So whatever.
The system doesn't lie.
But yeah, I tend to cut quite a lot of low end out, because I just find it can make things really muddy really quickly if you're not really careful with it, especially when you then go on to the next stages in the production process. But
my methodology when working with EQ, like equalizing sound, is just there's two kind of schools of thought where you could do additive EQ or subtractive EQ. But the way I kind of deal with that is a process where I just ask myself, why am I doing it? Like if you're like, there's surgical EQ where you're kind of cutting out the stuff that you don't need, right?
Yeah.
But then there's a point where you want to say like, well, that hi-hat's it's not, not cutting through the mix enough, so I want to add to that, right?
Yeah.
So that's the question that I always ask myself. Like, if I'm amending something, are you doing it out of habit, or are you doing it because you want it to sound better? Because when you're first starting out as like a producer, or you're doing mix work or anything like that, there's kind of, you end up doing stuff for the sake of it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And if you start asking yourselves those questions, why am I doing this? What do I hope to gain out of it? Then you get far better results. Because if, for example, you're saying, well, I want to, some people just say, I want a punchier kick. And it's like, well, why? Like, is the kick not punchy at the moment? And, why am I making the kick punchier?
Yeah.
Is it because something else is competing with it? Or is it because the track just lacks energy and stuff like that? And the minute you take a step back and, start asking yourselves questions about that, it's kind of, it tends to make the workflow a lot easier.
You're then making the right decisions based on what you're actually trying to achieve. Because a lot of the time you'll add additive EQ so that something pushes forward in the mix, but actually you might want to do something a different way, like using like compression, like sidechain compression. It's kind of what I'm mainly thinking of, especially with your example of the kick, where for the listener, when you listen to a dance track and it's like throbbing, it's probably the way that I can describe it. Pumping, better word. And it pumps with the kick, so it's like like that. That is using a technique called sidechain compression, where essentially when the kick hits, it ducks the volume of the other parts of the track. And actually, I used to use that in the music that I used to make, because it used to mean that I could get that sound of the kick, and I used to use it really lightly, right? Because it was either do that or make a big kind of additive EQ, which means adding sound, coloring the sound, rather than taking away sound, which was always my kind of preference in terms of, if I wanted to try and make something sound different, I would always try and take away from the sound rather than add to it. I would.
That's what I mean about asking yourself that question, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would add in big, wide kind of frequency ranges, so I wouldn't add like a little blip, because you're going to add what's called resonance, which is kind of like whistling, almost like a whistling sound. So if you listen to something and it's got like a kind of sound, like a whistling sound, obviously, like you want to remove that because it's unpleasant, and you don't want to add that in, right? I guess.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to you. Sorry, I like talking about this. It's quite interesting because I'm a bit rusty when it comes to this piece, but you do it all the time, so I find it fascinating.
Yeah, so at the moment, because I tend to use so when I process my drums, I then put them through a bus, and I use like a dynamic EQ.
What's a bus, Dan? Explain bus.
It's when you just basically take your audio input and put it to somewhere else. That's it. You move it along to its own channel, so you can do all your processing and then push it somewhere else. So I use buses for like reverb, so you can push your kit so you can decide the amount of reverb you want. So you can essentially shape your reverb on its own separately, as opposed to doing it on a per instrument basis. Yeah. So the reason for using a bus would be like, I've got my kit and I've put it in a room. Let's say the room is the reverb, and I'm like, I want that to sound like it's in... I'm just going to give you I want my drums to sound like they're in the shower. Yeah. Unreasonable, but
if you want,
I want my drums to sound like they're in the shower. But then at some point, if I want the bass to sound the same, I don't want to reprocess that. So I'll just, bus my bass to the same shower room reverb or whatever.
Absolutely.
And likewise with vocals. So that's the kind of purpose of it, is consolidating it, so you don't have to have multiple different reverbs.
It saves on your computer's resources as well. If you're putting 17 tracks through one reverb, that's one plugin that you're running, rather than running 17 plugins on each of the tracks, which then, for audio work can be really easy on your computer. Sometimes it doesn't really require that much resources, but when you're building a song, it can get quite chunky quite quickly.
Yeah, it's because you don't think as well. You just kind of like, I want that bass to be more compressed, so you throw a compressor on it. It's like, I want to cut out some of those frequencies, and you don't go back to the old EQ. You're like, let me just EQ the sound I've already made.
It's just EQ the EQ. Yeah, it's like, it turns into an exhibit meme, right? I heard you like EQ, so I got your EQ and put EQ on your EQ. Yeah.
That's basically how it is, though. Yeah. So I've kind of covered off the process in terms of how I write songs for myself. I haven't really written any songs recently where I've sung, because the whole vibe that I was going for with being an artist was that I sung about stuff that was kind of practical, and I called it topical humor because it was just about stuff that had happened, and it was just a bit of a humorous twist on it. And I just haven't felt that in probably the last year and a half because I've been stuck at home.
That's bleak.
And you don't have that. Yeah, but it's just like I did a song about like COVID when we first got locked down and stuff, and it was about people nicking toilet paper and stuff like that. And but that was the last thing I'd done. It was like I'd done the video in my house, which was cool, and I had some people send in some footage and all that sort of stuff. But I want that creative freedom to be able to go out somewhere and record something because that's the thing I'm looking forward to most about like lockdown properly ending, is being able to go to different venues and start experimenting with doing, more decent videos. I've got like an 80s inspired project that I'm working on with someone, and I'm kind of excited to do some more maybe let's call it flamboyant kind of videos, just to piss about and get some extra lights and make stuff look cool, because that's part of the enjoyable process. So I mean, that kind of leads me nicely onto like collaboration with artists. So one of the most valuable tools I've been given, it was by a guy called Wes, a really useful guy out in LA. He sent me what's called a pre-production form, and it just has questions on there. I haven't actually got the example in front of me, but I'll just paraphrase it. It says, it's questions like, who do you associate with as an artist? What are your goals as an artist? What's your ideal scenario 6 months from now? And what do you hope to achieve by recording and stuff like that?
Right.
So it's not about like, what's your favorite kick drum, or, give me a song that you want to sound like. It's like, because some people, once you ask those questions, you can kind of help them work towards their actual goal, as opposed to just providing a service of like, I'll record your song and put it out there for you. Because the whole point of me doing the side hustle of setting up an audio business was to be able to help people from start to finish, people that don't really know what they want, and try and push them in a direction that they want to go, as opposed to where I think they should go. Because, some people have very different goals to me. Like my goals are just to put songs out and just advertise them and reap the rewards kind of thing.
Yeah.
Some people might want to focus on their live sound. So there's no point in me auto-tuning them to crap if they're going to go and just play it on an acoustic guitar somewhere and be bad, or there's no point in me leaving it untuned if they want to go and play trap music or something like that.
Yeah.
So understanding those goals. So yeah, my projects when it comes to collaborating with artists kind of vary from mixing to full recording, and I put consulting in there because I say consulting is a service. If somebody wants to send you something and say, what do you reckon about this bass tone, or what can we do, or can you edit just this bass? It's like, that's consulting and answering questions, etc. Obviously, I don't like put a fee on consulting, but it's something that I do include as a part of it, because sometimes people will come back and forth for weeks at a time asking different questions before they decide that recording with you is right for them. That
Pre-production form probably informs you quite a lot in terms of, do I actually want to take on this work or not? Is it right for me? Because
exactly,
I imagine
mate.
if someone does a pre-production and like, yeah, I want to sound like Napalm Death.
Yeah.
No disrespect, Dan, but you're probably not the right producer for them,
Well, that's my point. I tend to go for stuff that I would enjoy. I like taking on a challenge, but I normally then will tend to work for cheap, or will preface it with, look, here's my references. This is the kind of stuff I've done. This is a new step for me. But, I'm actually working on a rap project at the moment, and it's the first rap project I've done.
Oh, right.
But it's turned out really well. It sounds better than I'd have hoped for, considering it's not something I'd done before. And it's like, I just done it for cheap.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you want to do more stuff, then let's do it. But I wouldn't, go out there and be like, yep, I'm definitely your man for doing rap, because it's not something I normally do.
No.
I also try as best as I can when working with someone. I don't really like doing recording just from scratch, like building a track from scratch with people, because I like them to come with an idea so we can just build on those foundations. So it probably differs from when you were doing audio work, where you probably have to sit with someone and program the drums or record the drums and add the bass and stuff like that. I tend to work with them and say, right, what's the song you want to do? Have you got a demo of it? And if they've got a demo, and this is really cool for me, I basically say, record it to a click and send me the demo. Tell me what tempo it's at, and I'll whack it into my DAW, my digital audio workstation. So anything like Logic or whatever you're using.
Cubase. Got to get a mention of Cubase. Logic, Pro Tools, Fruity Loops. What's the other one? Audacity.
But so I'd import that, and I would do what I think is right for that track immediately.
Right.
So if somebody sends me a demo, as soon as I import it, I'll listen to it and I'll go, right, this is what I think should be added, whether it's like a tambourine here or whether it's, and I'll come back with notes and say, right, that chorus is too long, or, in my opinion. And it's always like an opinion thing. I'll say, I think that chorus is too long, or I think that interlude just needs a bit of work. Send it back to them. And they either disagree respectfully, or they say, no, you're right. I'm easy either way. It doesn't, it's not under my name. I'm not releasing it, so who cares?
Well, yeah.
I tend to work my whole process around what they want and what makes them happy.
Right.
So I would happily sit there and say, I think, this guitar should be cut out. And if they're like, no, it's like, we love that guitar. It's like, fine, good, your choice, But then, I tend to get like a foundation recorded by myself, because I don't do live drums. So I'll program the drums. get like an initial drum sound, and then the synths that I want to use. Because even if it's a rock track, I'll add synths, and I'm not talking potent like big high-end synths. I'm talking like just layers.
Yeah.
So you can differentiate the chorus. I'll add the risers, as we talked about earlier. I'll add extra crashes. I'll add claps and ear candy, as I call it, little bits of synth that will just kind of sit in the background. And then I'll send it back to them and say, this is like a guide for what I think the track should be like. Play along to it, see what you think. If they don't like it, or they say that synth's not for me, or that synth's too loud, it's like, yeah, it's only really for texture, but at least you can get a vibe for how the song's going to sound.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, if you take everyone's record as they record it, like on their phone, or they record it just at home, it's all very, let's say one-dimensional, right? It'll be like a guitarist and a vocalist, or it'll be a piano and a vocalist. And it's about, for me, is finding that bigger picture and trying to make it more, I guess, radio-worthy or pop, I guess.
Yeah, I think as a producer, if you're an engineer, you record what the client wants you to record, right? But if you're kind of doing more of a producer style sort of service for them, it's about finding the je ne sais quoi, the nice ear candy, and it's about getting that original idea, which when they play live has got all of the energy of the loudness of playing live, right? And it's about kind of translating that using additional sounds, I suppose, to make it a bit more exciting, keep the energy. And because sometimes in the work that I used to do, I would take, and it was inspired from a band I used to listen to all the time called Emarosa, and they had a couple of songs actually that had like almost like an egg shaker in it.
Oh, every time, mate.
In the choruses. And it's heavy music with shouting and loads of singing and like heavy guitars and stuff. And then like the chorus would kick in, and it would just be like this egg shaker, and it's just such a vibe, to use your word, right? It's just anybody who listens to that just bops along with the egg shaker. And so it's about adding those sorts of things. I bet you, and I guarantee you, they don't play with an egg shaker live, do they? Because that would be bananas. But that was a decision that was made in the production process we need to differentiate this part of the song to all of the other parts. And the way that we do that, and the way that we get people like, it's just that kind of like rolling of the neck and just like every, it is universal when you've got that just that kind of like, sound over it's that bit that everyone kind of bops their head to. And that encapsulates what a producer should be finding in terms of the additive stuff that they're bringing to that track, that kind of vibe and energy. And, it's hard to put your finger on in terms of what exactly it is, but that's my opinion.
Like, you're exactly right. It's like when you have a conversation with someone, though, if you're like, do you know what, we should add a tambourine here, and they're like, absolutely not. Like, we don't have a tambourine player. It's like that's where you have to draw the line and be like, well, I can't do my job as a producer, right? That's what I mean, is when I say to people, I'm sending it to you with, the textures, the synths. And I normally use a shaker. I use an extra snare over the chorus that's like a bit more punchy, just to differentiate it. But there's, I don't really know who said it, but it's like around the producer communities where people are basically saying that a song should tell a story for the listener.
Yeah.
Subconsciously, right? So, the lyrics are normally very heartfelt. If you've got a good songwriter, it's, something you can sink into, you can kind of visualize, right? But the song also needs to follow that, in the sense that you don't want to have just a cut and paste of your chorus. You add something in each chorus, so it builds up throughout. And then when you get to the end, you actually feel like, wow, like it's done.
Yeah.
There's a couple of songs written by Max Martin, who's like responsible for Katy Perry and Britney Spears. He's like a really, really cool songwriter. And melodically, like, he adds some of the melodies from the chorus into the verse.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I like that.
And you don't even know that it happens. So then when the chorus comes in, there's a sense of familiarity.
Yeah.
So you're almost like, I was ready for this, which is just awesome.
And that's what people love, right? That's what gets people hooked. That's why a lot of these big artists are so popular, because they use melody that is familiar, and they reuse those melodies in each song. Lewis Capaldi is a great example of that, right? He's got a very specific type of like song that he writes, and he's brilliant at using melody, interweaved in his songs. But also whoever's doing his arrangement and doing his producing is excellent at like making each chorus sound just that the little bit special every time, a little bit more special every time until the end happens, and it's like, oh.
This is what I mean, though. It's easy to just record that and be like, all right, say it's a piano arrangement. It's easy to be like, right, so we've got the piano chords.
Yeah.
Get him in, get old Lewis in, sing for us, boy. And he goes, belts it out, obviously in one take because
he's an absolute
professional
machine.
singer.
Yeah.
Yep. And then go, right, we're done. You just add a bit of compression, you EQ the vocal.
Job.
Maybe whack a bit of auto-tune on, who knows? Not saying anything. But you tune it and then just that's it. It's radio ready.
Yeah.
But then a producer's probably going to come along and go, hang on a minute, like, where's the story? Like, where's the build-up?
Yeah.
They might even add like just subtle stuff in the background or, add like a sub bass that you can feel but you can't hear over the chorus. And it just adds that extra layer. And that's what I love though, is that people come to you with a song and I'm like, I like it as it is, but there's just so much more we can do. But that's like part of the back and forth process of, what would you want to hear from it? Would you be opposed to having like a tambourine in the chorus? Would you be opposed to having the guitar, a counter melody of the guitar on a synth just to kind of add some extra dynamics to it and stuff like that? Or would you want it to be in unison, all this sort of stuff? And it really gets me fired up because I like hearing the end result. I had a song that came to me that was on an acoustic guitar and vocal. Really good singer, really good songwriter. And when we were talking about it, I was like, it feels very much like it should be a full band song.
Yeah.
Like not because I want extra money. Like I done the track for free for him because it was a charity record. But I was like, I can feel it already that it just needs like an old style drum, like Bob Dylan kind of sound where we want everything to come in because that chorus is so potent that I can feel it in your voice, but like I just wanted everything else to come in with it. So we moved everything to piano, kept the whole first verse and first chorus on piano, and then as the second verse came in, the drums and bass came in.
Nice.
It's just yeah.
I can already hear it in my head in terms of how. Yeah, nice. I like it. Yeah, it's making magic, isn't it? It's making magic. I love it.
Ear candy, yep.
Ear candy, indeed. So we could probably spend another 2 hours like gushing over how fun writing songs and producing songs are, but we have a limited time together today. So why don't you talk me through your next steps? So let's say we've finished the song, we've made the magic, we've made a hit single, right? Then you've got to charge your customer for doing the thing that you did for making magic, and then you've got to manage all of your files and get it out to all of the platforms if you're doing that part of it. So how does that work in your world?
Billing is simple for me because I agree a fee up front. And I agree, something that we talked about is agreeing like a revisions fee. Yeah. Because, a lot of artists that I work with, I'm very involved with from the start. So it's not like anything comes as a shock. It's not like I'll sit with them for hours and, be going back and forth, adding all this stuff. And then suddenly I'll send them a mix that's in a different key and different instruments. It's like, you've been aware of it. So I tend to charge on a revisions basis after their initial revision. So I'll send it back to them and say, look, any changes you want, put them in a list, send it to me. I'll make all those changes, and then anything from that point on should be chargeable, really. I'm pretty easygoing because it's my side hustle kind of thing.
Yeah.
I use an invoicing platform to make sure that people feel like they're getting the professional service they deserve, right? So I can actually break it down on what I'm charging them for. So when it comes to next time, then again, they know exactly what they're paying for. So I'm not just kind of throwing a figure out in the air and saying, oh, yeah, just pay me that amount. It's like I charge a set amount for certain services.
Right.
So you start with a full service package and then you can take stuff off, So it's like if you're not doing mastering.
Got a price list.
Yeah.
Nice.
So you basically take it off. If you're not mixing for them and you're just doing arrangement.
Yeah.
It's like somebody sent me a track to, like this rap track that I was talking to you about. The music was already done. He just was having trouble balancing the vocals and getting them sounding good. So basically it was like an editing job for vocal and just getting it to sit right over the mix that already existed. So it's like a quick and easy project, really. So it's like, would I charge a full service for that or just kind of, rattle through it? But it also means that people can pay in kind of bulk or they can pay in sections. Because, if you're working with a band that's got 5-6 members or whatever, each of them want to pay a share instead of consolidating that money and having to send it across. It's like, that's kind of how it worked back in my day anyway.
Yeah.
You pay a share, you split the cost of whatever the album is and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it also just, it allows people to appreciate the value being added and costed, much like with anything, like any standard business. You don't want to just kind of like, I know I operate out of my bedroom and I do operate out of a studio as well. But if somebody comes to my house, pre-COVID and wants to record something, you want them to still feel like they're getting the experience and the value they would from like a big studio as well.
Yeah.
Which one of the key points of that is having invoices, so you can track it as well. People want to know that they're paying for an official service if they ever need to come back and get a refund for something, or say for example, well, I can't really think of any examples where it would be refunded. A service is a service, right? But
no refunds.
I always said to Kerry, if we were going to she was talking about getting like a fruit machine, the ones you put money in and you pull the switch and it.
Oh, like a one-armed bandit.
I don't know if that's what they're called, but it's like a little fruity machine, a one-armed bandit.
Because you pull the arm, and it's a bandit because it takes all your money. So,
well, of course it does.
One-armed bandit.
That's what it's designed to do.
There you go.
I like it.
My dad's a Cockney, so he's got funny ways of saying everything.
It's just the first time I've heard it. So yeah, we were going to get one of those fruities.
Right.
And I was just going to put a sign above it that said no refund. So anyone that come around my house had a skinful, kept throwing their money in the machine and losing because it's never going to pay out. And if it does, then fair play. But yeah, as soon as somebody says, look, mate, I've put like 50 quid into your fruit machine. Can you open it up and take it out? I just
hell no.
Tap the sign. Sorry, no refunds.
No refunds.
I don't make the rules. I just enforce them. So that's my billing process. And then I've got my file management process, which kind of follows on from our conversation about automation.
Right.
If I get a new client, I ask for their artist name, or I use their normal name, whatever it is, but that's part of the pre-production form. I open my app and it says, what's the client's name, sir? And then I enter the client name and it creates all of the files and all of the folders in my Dropbox immediately.
Does it actually say sir, though?
No.
Okay, I was going to say, that is delusions of grandeur, where you have your own little bot calling you sir.
No, it doesn't yet, but it's a quick change. So it creates like a file uploads folder for them to upload files. Got mixes, Logic projects, masters, and invoices.
Right.
That's it.
So a couple of clicks, all of the folders structure that you need is just there. Nice. I like it.
Exactly. It's something I adopted really recently when we were talking about, because, I do it for the Five Guys stuff now that it automatically creates the folder in Dropbox. Yeah. So I kind of took that same principle and applied it to my audio stuff. So I really enjoy that.
That's the bit that you enjoy. Not the making music, but the file automation. Woo!
I enjoy saving time. Woo! Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Excellent. Well, I feel that was good to go through. I love it. I think that, it's interesting to see that actually, as you've just said, some of the workflows that you've adopted at work that we've spoken about in previous episodes, you've then gone, oh, hang on a minute, actually this would be good for my side hustle as well. And you've kind of, kept it consistent, which is something that I've done as well. So I think that's probably, a good segue into me running through the podcast workflow for Thrive Guys.
Yes, please.
This is going to be a very meta conversation, because
the main thing about this is I actually don't know how you edit it.
Well,
I know how editing works, and I know largely what we do, but I'm keen to hear your thought process and your actual putting it into practice. So I decided to start with actually just going through the end-to-end piece in terms of how we do this, because I think that might be quite interesting. I'm not going to go into loads of detail, but I'm just going to kind of briefly touch upon each point. Mm-hmm.
I don't really make any music anymore, so it's actually quite fun for me to be doing audio work, and I do a significant amount of audio work every week in the form of editing this podcast. So that, from end to end, falls into a number of sort of different tasks. So, the first thing that obviously we need to do as a team is come up with a topic for the stuff that we're going to talk about. And, to give the listener a peek behind the curtain, we don't tend to come up with topics weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks in advance. Normally it's quite an informal process.
Correct.
For example, the idea for this episode was dreamt up whilst we were at the climbing gym earlier this week, purely because we were spitballing other work ideas, and this actually felt like the most interesting one for us to talk about, because, we want to talk about stuff that's interesting to us, and we hope that it will be interesting to people that listen to it. I don't want to talk about things that aren't interesting to me just to be interesting to other people. To be honest, that's just not my.
Sure.
It's not the reason why I do this, and I'm sure you feel the same, Dan. Obviously, as we talked last week, we are doing some longer series of episodes which require a little bit more kind of forward planning. The example that I'm talking about is completing various productivity hacks and kind of evaluating them and seeing whether they're worth the paper they're written on. And those, as I say, are longer form projects that we've spread out over a couple of months. So I think actually, though, the way that originally came about was, again, I pitched that to you at the climbing gym as well. I think the kind of previous week. So
it's what they say: the best ideas come from climbing between friends, right?
That's what they all say. Everyone says that. Literally, even people who don't know what climbing is, they go, you know what? Whatever you said is the truth. Okay, so once we come up with a topic, we'll kind of spitball roughly. Okay, this is the kind of outline. This is what the title means. So this is kind of what we want to talk about. And once we have what we believe to be a rough plan, it goes into our factory floor Notion page, which is essentially a Kanban board where each episode is a record card. And that record card holds all the data about the show, including the show's outline, any external links, and any other information about the show that is going to be useful for publishing. So, show notes and things like that. And so you might notice, actually, dear listener, that some of the newer episodes that we've done in the last kind of couple of weeks and months feel more structured and feel a little bit more researched and feel a little bit more together. And this is because we recognise that beyond talking about what we know about kind of on a day-to-day basis, for example, the first episode about managing tasks and projects or whatever, it's actually quite difficult to reel off the cuff an articulate dialogue about any certain topic, right?
Yeah.
So we tried that, and we actually found that we didn't dive into the level of detail that we kind of wanted to. So, these conversations don't just happen, right? Conversations are quite clumsy. And so we need to prep broadly what we want to say to make sure that the conversation stays on the right track. I mean, we're really bad at kind of going off on tangents anyway, but I think that's kind of the fun of what we do. But actually bringing it to, okay, these are the main topics that we want to talk about to make sure that we cover everything in a full and complete way that makes it interesting for the listener to listen to. That's kind of what we're hoping to achieve.
That's what we're aiming for as well, yeah, obviously.
Exactly. So both Dan and myself, we have a notes page in the show record card where we prepare our longer form notes beyond the show's outline. So this is where we have our own kind of personal notes that are we keep them in a separate page inside the record card so that it doesn't become this massive long document. And well, personally, I have your notes and my notes on my screen at the same time, so I can kind of broadly see where you are in your sort of mind, so I don't kind of completely interrupt you and lose your trail of thought. If I ask a question, it's kind of leading you to the next kind of part of the discussion, because I like to be helpful. The way that we do our notes though is very, very different, right?
You write bloody essays.
I do write essays.
I feel like I'm back in 4th grade.
I'm sorry, Dan, but your objective is to basically use every kind of block type Notion make in his episode.
If I make my content engaging, if that's what you're saying, then you are correct.
Yeah, I mean, your use of colours, only Michelangelo would cover. You use literally every colour. You
sound like a child, like I got sticky notes all over it. I put a blue column in one of them. That's it. You're seething.
I'm seething. I literally use headings and text, because I don't need to be bombarded with emojis and call outs and toggles and
no, I try and find some good quotes, some little puns in there, and I put those as call outs.
Yeah.
But then the problem is Joe reads them and then steals them. So.
Yeah, I did that in the episode intro for today's episode, didn't I? Yeah. I have that. Well, it just made sense. I was going to do the intro and I liked it, so I took it. What did I say earlier? I said something earlier about not being too shy of being a deceitful little so-and-so. So there we go. On brand. What I try to do with my notes is ultimately kind of give myself the easiest job of editing when it comes to actually getting the episode ready for publishing. I'll come back to what I actually do to get it ready for publishing in a bit, but what I'm trying to do with my notes is just to make it easier for me in the edit to actually get it done, because editing is the most time-consuming part of this podcasting process. So once we've got all of the notes together, and what we try to do is get the notes together before we record. The reality is that Dan does his notes on a Friday night and I do mine on a Saturday morning, and then we record probably about half an hour after I've finished my notes. So we are just in time manufacturing this podcast.
Yeah, we are.
Especially up until the point that we record it, but we have day jobs, it's hard to do.
Not mentioning the fact that we're 6 weeks ahead of schedule or whatever.
Well,
which is why we've done it, because I wouldn't even say we're ill prepared, right? We are prepared. It's just that we do it very last minute, and it's if something does happen, we've got 6 weeks of fallback, which is cool.
Exactly, because life gets in the way. We all have other commitments that we need to adhere to, and we all have jobs that aren't part-time. So, we do have quite a bit of buffer. So we've got to the show to the point where we're happy to record it, and so then it's on to recording. And to be honest, I have briefly spoken about how we record episodes in, I think, 4, 6, and 7. We've talked about the kind of apps that we use, and full disclosure, I got all of my inspiration for our recording situation from the guys over at Relay FM. And if you don't know who Relay FM are, they're a podcast network that has got loads of great kind of nerdy technology and productivity podcasts, similar to kind of stuff that we do, but also different as well. And if you've not heard of them, please go check them out. They're very, very good. And the inspiration I got from them is some of the apps that we use, like Audio Hijack, which I'll come back to in a minute, but also the process of how we record our own local audio. And this allows us to get the highest quality possible without having to be in the same room as each other, because we started this podcast whilst we were in lockdown, right? And so being in the room together wasn't possible, and doing it this way actually is probably better than us being in the room together, when you're thinking about mic bleed and stuff like that. So from an editing point of view, it's actually much better than us being in a room together, in my opinion.
And obviously the personal reasons as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think we can be too near each other. We get along online.
Yeah, absolutely. We get along online, but in person, it's sparks do fly. So
that's why we go to the climbing centre. It's got the padded mats for when we scrap.
When we suplex each other, yeah. Not only does it allow us to get the highest quality possible, it also, it means that we don't have to use like Zoom recording, or Skype recording stuff. It's the best way that we've found. So we use Audio Hijack to record our local audio. So when I speak, I'm speaking on Discord, which is the video conferencing tool that we use, and I then record my local audio into Audio Hijack, and I record it as a WAV file, so then it saves as it goes along, so if anything does happen, I can get a partial recovery of that file. You do the exact same thing on your end, and then we stitch the two together, because we've at the start of every podcast we do a little clap, and that's how we line up the audio. So actually what you're listening to is just my audio and just Dan's audio, just put next to each other, essentially, right? So I used to use GarageBand to do my recording, and Dan, I think you used to use Logic before we moved to Audio Hijack. And look, these are great tools, right? But in my opinion, it always felt a little bit risky, because they are quite big apps. There's lots of stuff that's going on with them, and they're doing lots of things whilst you're recording. And Logic, objectively, is larger than GarageBand by comparison. And I always had like a bit of nervousness about whether they would just be rock solid every time, which is, I know it's bananas given that Logic is Logic, right? It's a professional application and it's designed for multi-track recording, stuff that's way more complex than what we do, but that's kind of the point, right? So with Logic, you're recording lots and lots of tracks, but they're, it's a 3-minute long song, right? We are recording for a very long period of time, usually an hour and a half, sometimes longer. And it's just, one long audio track. So, there isn't really an option for us to do another take. I think if we had to do that at any point and start again, that would just kill me. I don't think I would want to. I'd be like, no, we're skipping this week. We're not going to do this topic. Put it in the sea.
I agree entirely, and I agree with that nervousness. Like, I trust Logic, and I've used Logic for a considerable amount of time, but I've also seen it crash, and I've also seen it crash unexpectedly.
Exactly.
Like when I'm doing nothing, I've seen it crash and then I have to reopen it. And it'll be like, yeah, I've auto-saved it, but that's fine. But then trying to stitch that together and go, right, well, where did we stop? And then it's actually really difficult to find your flow back in a conversation.
Absolutely.
But we've had it where we've made mistakes before. And that's the purpose of having the notes, is we can be like, all right, we were here, just ask that question again and crack on. But when we were doing the kind of free form conversation and not planning it as much, it was very difficult if something did go wrong, or like, we had some connection issues right at the start. Like I use Quaz to prioritize my Discord traffic now. But before then, if a call had dropped out or something like that, or, when we were doing it on the iPad and stuff, getting back into that flow and being like, right, so what were we talking about? Where were we?
Yeah.
And then stitching that together from an editing perspective must be a nightmare.
Yeah, it really is. So, the way that we've evolved over time is to just make it easier for the edit, right? Because that is, we speak for an hour and a half, but believe you and me, dear listener, the amount of work that goes into actually editing it is far, far more in terms of time. So, and yeah, you're right. We use Discord for the actual video call. We bounced off of FaceTime, I think, because it didn't play nicely with audio hijack and us actually being able to hear each other and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
We can't use Zoom because the plan limits to 45 minutes or something similar amount of time than that, like the free plan.
We could probably
I ain't paying for
benefit from
Zoom.
that.
No. When there's Discord, which is free, and you can just be on here forever, then what's the point in paying for something that... Do you know what I mean? It doesn't make sense.
What's the point in ending this phone call?
Well, exactly. We'll just keep it going forever. And I refuse to use Microsoft Teams at the weekend. I'm not doing it. Yeah. Spend all my time in the week.
It goes back to that point, spaceship you and separating work and personal, right?
Exactly.
We use WebEx, and I don't want to set up a WebEx on a weekend.
No.
Especially using my business account, etc., etc. I just, keep it separate. This is my podcast setup, but again, we cover that in many other episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we go through the recording, as we go through, I try to keep an eye on the time code and note down any specific areas I know will need work in the edit. One thing I have been trying to keep an eye on in terms of somewhere I want to try and improve is the structure of the episodes and using MP3 chapters. So if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, you would have noticed that I've added added chapters into the episodes so that you can jump around in your player depending on the bits that you want to listen to. So if you're interested in just listening to Dan rather than me, then you can do that. I've tried to make it such that you can, if you prefer Dan's dulcet tones to mine, you can jump around and listen to all of Dan's bits.
We know that's not the case. I've had many comments to say, loved your podcast, really great content. Joe's voice is like velvet. And I'm just like, well, all right. Thanks for informing me. I'll pass on the message. I had to send you the screenshots. What do you think about me? And they just go, sorry, dinner's ready. Just pop away.
That's hilarious.
Chumps.
Look, the thing is, right, I've had a voice this deep for a long time, and I always hated it because when I was a singer, it meant that I wasn't getting those high notes that people like you were able to get. And so now I'm doing spoken word. I've now found my element of something where my voice plays quite nicely into. But it's horses and courses, really. We're always thinking about what we don't have rather than what we do, I suppose.
No, for sure.
One thing I just to finish off my point about MP3 chapters is I always forget to make a note of when we move on during the conversation, because I really I'm just in the throw of it. And so one thing that I want to try and do is do that, because then I know exactly where each chapter needs to kind of start, whereas at the moment I kind of just have to listen to it all and go, right, okay, that's where we start talking about this, etc., etc. We've now finished the recording. We've had a fantastic conversation. Then what happens, right? So I just want to drop in a cheeky little bit of automation once the recording is finished. And Dan, I think you'll appreciate this. So I use a product called Hazel, which is a file automation tool on the Mac. And I have created a Hazel action to automatically rename the file and copy it into the Dropbox folder based on a tag that I give the file. So I'll use Finder to tag the file. For example, this episode is episode 17. So I'll tag the audio file with EP space 17, which as soon as I hit return, it will fire up Hazel to rename the file with a predefined prefix and suffix based on that tag. So it will kind of say EP17, Joe Audio, and then the date, essentially, the date it was recorded. and then it moves the files into Dropbox and then files it into the subfolder for the episode without me having to touch it. So I know you have an automation that creates the episode file on a Friday, and so all I literally have to do is go into my, where Audio Hijack is saving all of the audio files, tag it with the relevant episode, and it does all of the moving and copying and all of that good stuff without even me having to think about it. And it lets me know with little notifications that, hey, I've copied your file, and hey, I've put it into Dropbox, and now, hey, I've sorted it into the subfolder. Thank you very
Lovely.
much, Joe. See you later. So it's job's done at that point, and then it uploads into Dropbox, and so that's my Saturday work, quote unquote, done. Jobs are good, and I can go and do whatever else I need to do from there with the day. Then Sunday comes around, and Sunday is editing morning. So I get up early on a Sunday, and then I do the edit. Editing is probably the most time-consuming part of the project as a whole, and whilst it's an element I enjoy, it's always an element that I'm a little bit behind on. So there is a pretty big backlog of edits that I need to finish, but it's just the bit that takes the time. And as this is something that we're doing outside of all of the other stuff that we do, both in and outside of work, it's something that is always, I always try and carve out Sunday morning to do it, and I always try and at least give myself 2 hours worth of editing.
Yeah.
And so that usually gets me basically an episode done.
So I know what people are asking as well out loud. They're saying, hey, hang on a minute. Doesn't Dan do audio work? Doesn't Dan have an audio workstation? Why doesn't he edit it, Joe?
You tell me.
Good question. Why is that, Joe?
Well, we've talked about this before. I'm a control freak.
Exactly. And it works out really well for us.
Moving swiftly on. That's the answer. It works out great for you because you don't have to do it. But
exactly.
There's some things in a creative process that you can outsource. And, that might be, your social media presence, or that might be your marketing. But there are some things, in my opinion, that I want to retain creative control over, and that I'm happy to invest the time in because it makes the end product better. And that for me is the editing, right? So I want to retain creative control over the editing because I want to make sure it's the best product, and whether I'm the right person for the job or not, I don't care. I have enough experience and can do it quickly enough, and I know what the end product, what I want the end product to look like, and I think you and I, Dan, are aligned on that. And so it's an element of the process that I don't want to relinquish control over, and I'm quite happy to kind of invest the time and effort in doing it. I also typically require a bit more editing than you do, so I want to make sure that we get that right.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why. So that is, sometimes you have your little idiosyncrasies in life, and that's mine. So, but it saves you a job, and I'm quite happy to put the time in. So I think it works quite well.
Yeah, it's a good balance because
good balance.
I tend to maintain.
You do the social media
Notion,
stuff,
and social media. Yeah, well, we collaboratively do the Notion side, but I try and make sure I update all of those. I create the templates to make sure they're pretty swift.
Yeah. Set
up the website, and manage the social media now.
You do earn your crust. Cool. I'll give you that. You do earn the crust. I'll do the creative-y bit, and you kind of take care of the rest broadly. It's
your season of creativity as well, so
it is my season of creativity. Exactly. You're very
it's on your list.
Yeah, you remembered. Well done. So it works well, actually. The way that we've kind of divided and conquered, I think it works well. And actually, it was a bit of a step for me to even relinquish control of like social media and stuff. Even though I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to social media, I guess I'm too old now. I don't understand it. I spent like 25 minutes trying to work out what was it? It was something on Instagram, and I just posted it completely wrong. And I don't know how I did it, and I don't know why, but it turned into a weird thing. I think it was like an IGTV thing, and I was like, what have I done? What is IGTV? I don't know what this is.
You can see where I started getting advice from Kerry, because I wasn't going to delete your stuff, right? You had a good effort. You started strong. Yeah, exactly. But then you can see where I've had to enlist the help of my marketing guru girlfriend.
It definitely looks a lot more professional than it did when I sort of tried to do it. But I took a break from social media for nearly 2 years. So for me, it was jumping back into something that people do this for a job, and I have no idea how it all works now. So more than happy to to relinquish that from a control point of view. But anyway, back to the editing. I edit on my iPad, exclusively on my iPad. So one of the reasons why we push everything into Dropbox at the end of every recording is so then I can download that from Dropbox into Ferrite Recording Studio, which is an absolutely fantastic app I heard about from the one and only Jason Snell, who is a long-time editor for Macworld and now an independent journalist and podcaster. Big fan of Jason, so thank you for the content on Ferrite that you made. It inspired me to lean into the iPad piece and edit on an iPad, and it's been great. It's been really great. Ferrite is basically an app that allows you to edit audio with an Apple Pencil on an iPad, which is so intuitive. It is awesome. And it feels, the reason why it's awesome is it's because it's tactile. It feels very tactile to just, to scrub things out with the pencil, and it's precise. And I think for me, it's the quickest way to get to a finished product for sharing and distributing and stuff. So
I think the precision thing was something I wouldn't have been sure of, but I'd be keen to see that and see how precise it is, and whether there's something you could do just in terms of cutting and editing just standard vocals, because it's one of my least favorite things in terms of just doing for records. So I might actually have give that a look.
It leverages all of the kind of things that make the iPad cool, like zooming and pinching and stuff like that. And then you get your pencil, awesome. And then you can drill right into the waveform, and then you can just like nip and tuck little bits. Which, believe you me, you can be very precise with it, because I edit your voice, Mr. Short. And sometimes I need to do some rather precise edits in order to get to the end product. And I'll go through those right now for you.
Oh no, this is what I was cautious about. As people that know me personally know how I actually talk, not how I sound on the podcast.
Oh yes. And now we're going to have a little peek
Can you
behind
bleep
the curtain.
Yeah.
So the workflow is I import audio into a template. So I've already created a template with the intro and the outro music and the outro sort of blurb, where we ask you very kindly to share it with your friends and give us 5 stars and etc, etc, etc. So all of that is all pre-recorded because it's consistent. Let's try and cut down on the amount of time it takes us to get to the end product. I line up mine and Dan's audio files. So we clap at the start of every take, which is really helpful. So you can just broadly line up the claps, and we know, okay, that's we're now aligned. And there's not usually any drift, actually. We're usually pretty aligned throughout that whole kind of hour and a half that we record. So then the next thing I do, the first thing I do to treat the audio, is I strip the silence, which is a little handy feature in Ferrite, which basically allows you to remove most of the non-talking bits. And you can set a threshold for how quiet it needs to be before it cuts it, and how long the silence needs to be before it cuts it. But it essentially just chops things all out into like the individual parts, rather than it being one really long audio file, which makes it much easier to just like bump things around. And just one of the things that you have to do when you're editing a podcast is, it's natural for people to talk over each other and to jump in and add something to what someone else is saying. But from a listening experience, that's kind of cluttered. It doesn't always sound kind of consistent and cohesive. One of the things that you will find, dear listener, if you are being kind of conscious about how you interact with someone, is that you will probably interrupt someone a lot more than you think. So what I tend to do is just like give the audio some breathing room either side. So it sounds like, rather than me interrupting Dan, or more likely Dan interrupting me, I push those out, so that, and I just nip and tuck it so that it doesn't sound like that. It just sounds like it's part of the natural kind of flow of things. So that strip silence piece allows me to kind of bump things around and just make it feel a little bit more pleasurable to listen to. Once I've done that, I hit play and I just listen, and I'm always looking ahead of the playhead for waveforms that look like big ums or sniffs or breaths. I'm not cutting out every single or breath or anything like that. I still want it to sound like a conversation. I still want it to be natural. And anyone who's doing editing, you don't want to cut out every single and and so and but and all of that kind of stuff, because that's how we talk and that's part of a conversation, and it will sound unnatural if you do that. However, what I am trying to do is neaten up the audio, so it basically sounds like, as I said earlier, we're having a more cohesive and flowing discussion. So, conversations are clumsy. We don't realise it when we're having them, that they are, but obviously when you record a conversation, it's exposed, and it becomes abundantly clear that we're not always as eloquent as we might think we are. And that is we as a species, right? That's not a personal attack on Dan or a we limited to just me and Dan, right? That is all of us. And so, it's important that we just recognize that. And in order to make a final product, there is a lot of bumping and, tweaking that needs to happen in order for it to sound like, it is just a flowing, cohesive thing.
I move away from the microphone to take a breath. So.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Dan. I appreciate it. Thank you. That'll make my editing
your life
better.
A bit easier.
So, look, I don't completely butcher the thing, right? I never make big edits, apart from when there are times where I have to cut out whole segments. Usually that's, for a couple of reasons. It could be for time. It could be, we've gone on too long about something, or that there's a technical problem that we have, or, it might just be that one of us has done a bit of a bad joke, or, it's just not landed in the way that we were kind of hoping for. And so, I make the exec decision at that point to cut it out. And that's on both sides, right? I think it's a generally accepted principle for us that, I make the final call as to what ends up on the cutting room floor, as I'm investing the time in doing it. And, there is a lot of time invested in doing it. I would say that every hour of unedited recording takes me at least 2 hours to go through and have a final product for. So, sometimes longer than that if we've been particularly but, it's usually about that kind of time, So I used to compress and EQ our audio as well, but now I don't. I think actually it sounds better when we just leave it as it is.
Yeah.
I think I was over-processing it in the earlier episodes, and so it was making our audio sound a bit squashy and a bit too treated. So I leave it au naturel now and just use the normalizing feature in Ferrite, which is something that it does at the export stage, to make sure it's at a decent volume for publishing. And so once that process has been completed, I then upload it to Podbean, which is our podcasting sort of host for all of the audio tracks, and schedule it for Sunday at 6 a.m. And that's when all of the episodes come out. So that's it from start to finish, really. The only other thing that we then do is we then do the episode kind of show notes, which is essentially a conglomeration of all of the topics that we've discussed and any links that we want to sort of refer people to, etc. But other than that, that's the process, and it seems to work all right. I don't know about you, Dan. I mean, I think we've got it to a well-oiled machine, albeit sometimes we don't leave ourselves a lot of time to do certain things. But what can you do?
It's to the wire. We work very close to the timings that we've set, but our routine works really well.
Yeah,
it's weekly, obviously. Every Saturday, I'm just up and I'm raring to go.
Yeah, me too. Thanks everybody for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to our show. And if you really, really liked it, please consider giving us a 5-star rating. That really helps us out. It helps us grow our audience. So, only if you loved it, but if you did, then that'd be really good. If you'd like to hear more from Dan or myself, please follow us on Twitter at ThriveGuysPod. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Say goodbye, Dan.
Goodbye.